Hey guys, welcome back to A Page in the Chapter, or welcome if you are new here. My name is Paige and today we are talking about the most read books of the 2024 Goodreads challenge so far. So this is a list that Goodreads themselves put out to show what the most read books of the 2024 Goodreads challenge have been so far. I find this data fascinating, and yeah, today we're going to talk through the romance and fantasy selections. We're going to talk about the ones that I've read, what am I surprised has made the list, what am I not surprised has made the list, what is on my radar, do I think any of them are there undeservedly, do I recommend them, etc, etc. We're just gonna have a very chatty video about this list that is the most popular books that people have read this year. So if you guys like the sound of this video and you would like to see more from me, then do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below and stay tuned for future content. I upload every single Wednesday and every single Sunday, so there is no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. You can also check me out on Bookstagram. I think I just hit myself in the throat. You can also check me out on Bookstagram at apaigeinchapter to see like pictures of pretty books and more of what I'm reading and have a say in what I actually read. You guys know what a Bookstagram is, I'm over explaining this. And so let's get into talking about these books. I'll be focusing on romance and fantasy just because that is predominantly what I read, if you can't tell from my background right now, so it doesn't really make sense for me to talk about the genres that I'm less familiar with. To start with the fantasy books, there's not many that I am surprised to see on this list. I feel like they are all very popular authors and very talked about books in the book community. I mean, the top 5 are completely unsurprising to me. So the books on this list are The Midnight Library, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, The Song of Achilles, Babel, Circe, Starling House, Bookshops and Bone Dust, The Unmaking of June Farrow, The Poppy War, The Lost Bookshop, Ninth House, and Mistborn. I have read 8 of the 12 books on this list, which I'm quite surprised by because I don't consider myself to be that well read in adult fantasy, but I have got to say that most of the books on this list did not come out this year and are not books that I read this year. I think only 2 of the books on this list are ones that I actually read in 2024, so I guess in some ways that's a little bit surprising that some of these books are still getting the attention that they're getting. So number 1 on this list is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I used to speak a lot about this book in 2021. I think The Midnight Library was my favorite book of that year. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely adored it, but I haven't read it in a couple of years now, so I don't know if my opinion on it would have changed, but given how much I adored it, I can't see my opinion of it changing. But The Midnight Library is a book about this woman who doesn't really want to live anymore, and so in The Midnight Library she is shown all of the possible lives that she could live, and she goes through them to see which one she would be like the happiest in. It's a very emotional fantasy, I would say. Like, it feels very literary fiction in the way that it reads, and it's very much looking at this expanse of human emotion and is kind of heartwarming and bittersweet all at the same time, which is why I gave it 5 stars, because those are emotions that tend to get to me. But I haven't seen people talk about The Midnight Library as much as they did when it first came out, so I'm a little surprised to see this make this list for 2024, just because I don't see anybody reading or talking about this. But I think it's probably important to mention that the book community, whilst has a really big impact on what's being read, is only a small proportion of the amount of people that read and would use Goodreads, so I'm gonna assume that can explain that. I've also read Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which is a collection of short stories about a coffee shop where you can travel through time, but the only rule is you have to be back at your table in the current timeline before your coffee gets cold. I believe I also read this book in 2021 and I didn't really like this collection of short stories. I'm not really a short story kind of gal. I don't think I've ever read a collection of short stories that I've particularly enjoyed, so I think it's probably time for me to stop trying. I love the concept for this one. I just found the execution to be lacking, and I just didn't care for most of the stories, to be honest with you, and I couldn't really tell you what any of them are about nowadays. I know a lot of people really love this series though, so if you think it's something you could enjoy, then I would maybe recommend trying this one, but from my own personal experience, I wouldn't recommend this. And also, I don't know if I would again like class it as a fantasy. It is a fantasy on pure like basics of, it's about time travel, so it has to be like fantastical in some kind of way, but it doesn't really read like a fantasy. The only fantastical element is the time travel aspect, because it's set in a modern world with modern people. There's not really any world building or anything that goes into it. It is just this concept. So again, like, also could be why I didn't really enjoy it, because it's not like a true fantasy in that sense. Then we have The Song of Achilles. Again, would I class this as fantasy? I guess I kind of have to, but this is a mythological retelling about Achilles and Patroclus. I didn't like this one either. All of these reads are from 2021 pretty much. Like, I remember reading them when I was at uni, like doing my undergrad, not my masters. Like, these are from a while ago. And yeah, I just didn't like this one either, and I wouldn't recommend this one. Circe is also on this list, so I'll just talk about these two together because they are both by Madeline Miller. I'm not necessarily surprised to see them here because I know these are very beloved books. Madeline Miller is a very beloved author, and these are the go-to books that you tell someone when someone wants a mythological retelling. Like, Madeline Miller has really claimed the genre as hers pretty much. There's a lot more books of that kind of style coming out now, but Madeline Miller is always the first that people think of, so I'm not really surprised to see these on this list. My preference is Circe rather than The Song of Achilles. It's been so long now that I don't think I would be able to really tell you why. It's just a vibe thing. Like, looking back, I think Circe was better. I think I enjoyed it more. I would be more inclined to recommend Circe over The Song of Achilles. There's not a lot of like true fantasy in this list, and that is very sad to me. There is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I read 50% of this book and DNF'd it. One of these days I will try and read it again. Also, I don't feel that inclined to give it a... I know a lot of people really struggled to get through this one. It is not really deemed to be the best R.F. Kuang book ever. It offers a very interesting take on dark academia and how westernized dark academia is as a subgenre, and offers kind of a different perspective to that and really looks at academia from a colonialist perspective. It's a very interesting book. It's just very big. I've heard that a lot of people have really struggled to get through this one, so I'm not alone in DNFing it at like the 50% mark. Bookshops and Bone Dust is on my autumn TBR for this year, so I will be reading it in 2024, and I'm not surprised at all to see this one here. I know Legends and Lattes is popular favourite, and this is kind of Travis Baldry's new release in that same world. This is a prequel to Legends and Lattes, and yeah, I'm very excited to read this one later in the year. I'm just holding off because it screams autumnal read. It is about bookshops, and the Legends and Lattes was just very autumnal too, and literally my entire master's degree was just bookshops and Bone Dust because I did a master's degree centered around the human skeleton, if you are new here and you don't know that. So I would literally do labs and get covered in bone dust and then go book shopping. So I feel like a kind of special connection to the title of that book. The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. Wow. I massively recommend this book. I gave this 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I then went out and picked up Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young just because of how much I loved The Unmaking of June Farrow. I haven't read Spells for Forgetting yet, but this book took me by surprise because it wasn't my normal read, it wasn't my kind of thing. But in The Unmaking of June Farrow, we follow our main character, June Farrow, and she is processing the loss of her grandmother and her mother, and is kind of under the belief that there is like a family curse placed on the women in this family, and she is starting to notice the signs of this curse affecting her, and she goes looking for answers. I am getting emotional just thinking about how much I enjoyed this book. I would highly highly recommend this one. The Unmaking of June Farrow is more of a magical realism type fantasy, but it's very cozy. It gives very spring vibes, to be honest, but I think other people might be able to read it and say it gives autumnal vibes, but to me it kind of screams spring. This was one of my favorites. I've actually read a lot of books that I think could be favorites by the end of this year, but I think you'll be seeing The Unmaking of June Farrow on the favourites list. The Poppy War, I have read The Poppy War. It's one of the few series that I've actually read and finished. I really enjoyed this. I'm not surprised to see this on this list at all, because I still imagine that this to be a very beloved, well talked about, and kind of just a standard fantasy to reach for now. It is a very popular kind of common name in the fantasy genre, and this is a military fantasy based on I think loosely based on the Opium Wars. And we follow our main character Rin. At the beginning of the first book is working her ass off to get into this very prestigious military school so that she can improve her station in life, and we follow her in the first half of book one as she is launched into this school setting and is forced to learn and keep up with classmates and be looked down on from where she comes from. And then we start to realise that they are attending this war school because they are actually going to have to go to war at some point, and you kind of see how these kids get launched into this real world like military setting. And yeah, this series is honestly quite harrowing. It's a lot, there's a lot of trigger warnings. It is a dark kind of military fantasy, but it's one of the best fantasy series that I've ever read, and I couldn't really recommend this one enough. I'm just genuinely like so not surprised to see this one on the list. I'm happy that it's still making these kinds of lists, even though it came out a good number of years ago now and the trilogy is complete. The Poppy War is one that I would 100% recommend, and it's not even my normal type of read because it's a bit darker than what I would normally go for. Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I'm not surprised to see this one here because everybody is obsessed with it, and there is a sequel that was announced. I think it's out, but I'm not sure. If you couldn't tell by the fact that I have no real understanding of the sequel for Ninth House, I did not like Ninth House and I don't recommend it. It's advertised as a fantasy dark academia centered around Yale secret societies. Again, I just felt like it missed the mark in the execution. I really struggled to care about any of the characters, and I really wanted more of this kind of Yale setting and secret societies, and it didn't really deliver on that at all. So I think my dislike for Ninth House could be a more personal thing, and just the fact that it didn't check the boxes that I was looking for it to check. I'm not necessarily surprised that it's on this list though, just because I know how popular Leigh Bardugo is, and I'm definitely in the minority for disliking Ninth House. And then the final fantasy book on this list that I have read is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I would recommend this one, and I'm not normally an epic fantasy kind of person. I have only read the kind of original Mistborn trilogy and I loved that. I didn't really love the way that it ended. If you have read it, then you'll kind of know what I'm talking about and probably know why I don't love the way that it ended, but I loved the experience of reading the books. I think this particular fantasy series has such an interesting magic system, and this was one of the first adult fantasies that I ever read, and it really showed me what I was missing by only staying with young adult fantasies. Because what I really loved about this book is, yes, it has your like very typical fantasy. We have like the ruler of a kingdom that is running the place to the ground and we hate, and we're going to try and overthrow him, but then it really delves into the politics of what happens when there is a power struggle, when he delves into that exploration of, okay, like you got the big bad guy, what happens next? And I really enjoyed this trilogy other than the ending. And now we can talk about the romance books, because we know that I read a lot more romance than I do fantasy, and I'm excited about these. Of the 12 of these books, I have read 8 again. I'm very surprised that I've read an equal number of the romance ones as I have the fantasy ones, but again, I think it's just because I haven't read all of them this year kind of thing. Like I've just accumulated the fantasy reads over time. The number one book on this list is Icebreaker, the first book in the Maple Hill series by Hannah Grace. I'm not surprised to see this one on here at all. I feel like this series is only gaining in popularity, and I think it was only released in its traditionally published form this year, so I'm not surprised to see this at number one. Do I recommend it? It's probably the question. Yes, it's a very fun hockey player and figure skater romance. If you enjoyed like the cutting edge movies growing up, then I think you would enjoy this book. It's nothing unique. It has way too much sex in it. The characters seem to act like they never go to college at all. Like they just go to parties and have sex and occasionally skate, but they don't ever really go to classes. But it was a really fun, like, good time read, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then sitting at number 5 is Wildfire by Hannah Grace, which is the sequel. I preferred Wildfire to Icebreaker. I don't know if a lot of people agree with me there, but I absolutely adored Wildfire. They are interconnected standalones, but where Icebreaker is a hockey sports romance, Wildfire is a summer camp romance. It takes place like over the summer, but we follow characters that we met in the first book as they are like working at this summer camp, and there's a no fraternization rule. And yeah, what I absolutely adored most about Wildfire is that the male main character was just such a cinnamon roll, like golden retriever character. I really loved the characterization of him. I thought it was quite unlike a male main character that I've read in a romance before. Like there's just not too many male main characters that read the way this one did, and I absolutely adored Wildfire. So I'm hoping to see Wildfire higher up the list. I loved Wildfire, but I think it's going to get outshone by Icebreaker, and then Daydream is coming out towards the end of this year, which is the third book in this series, and everyone has been very highly anticipating the character that the third book follows. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all to see these on here. I do really recommend them. They're so much fun, but my personal preference would be Wildfire over Icebreaker. And then sitting at number 2 is Happy Place by Emily Henry. I can't really begin to put into words how much I love this book. This is the book that made me want to start writing again, and is the reason that I have a book that I am writing. I adore Happy Place. This is a second chance romance about these two friends, and they were together for a really long time, so they share a friend group, and they have recently broken up. But when they are meeting up with their friends and doing this summer trip with their friends that they always do, they decide to not tell their friends that they're broken up. They don't want the attention on them. They just kind of want to give everyone that like one last get together as like the group that they are before they break the news that they have broken up. And so they're essentially fake dating. This book had me sobbing, and I feel like such a connection to Happy Place by Emily Henry, so I could not recommend it enough. We then have Twisted Love by Anna Huang. We know that I am a big Anna fan. I will read any book she puts out. She is a massive Insta-buy author for me, and Twisted Love was the first book that I ever read from her. I am going to say right now that I think Twisted Love is probably Anna's weakest book, but I don't remember too much of what happens in this one. I really am due a reread of the first few books in the Twisted series, to be honest with you, but I technically recommend Twisted Love because it was my entry point to the rest of Anna's books and the rest of the Twisted series, and I do think that you benefit from reading Twisted Love before you read Twisted Games, and Twisted Games I think is my favorite of the Twisted series, and where I think the real like flow of the series comes in, and it just really starts to like hit its stride with the second book. So I didn't love Twisted Love. I think it's the weakest one. It's not my favorite, but technically I would recommend it because I love the rest of the series, and again, it's just fun. Like, romance books are just so much fun, and this one is like well written, it has good characters. It's technically fine, but like that's what it is, it's just fine. We then have Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. If it wasn't for Bride, I think this would be my favorite Ali Hazelwood novel because it's fake dating. It's like science and STEM and academia as Ali Hazelwood is incredible at doing. It is also fake dating, which Ali Hazelwood is incredible at doing, as we saw in The Love Hypothesis, but it puts a spin on fake dating in a really fun way. So it follows our main character, and she is like a date for hire, and one of her like most like prominent like clients who like hires her to be his fake girlfriend at family events and things because he doesn't want to tell his family that he's like not actually dating her. She kind of is this fake date part-time while she in her real life is she's trying to grow her career in academia and be a professor and a researcher, and when these two lives kind of mesh with each other, she is kind of becoming interested in her fake date's brother, but her fake date's brother believes that she is like really dating his brother, so it's all kinds of complicated. It is so much goddamn fun and you have to read it. I loved it so much. We then have Twisted Games by Anna Huang. I didn't realize this was on this list, otherwise I would have spoken about them together. I already said when talking about Twisted Love that Twisted Games is my favorite in this series. Twisted Games is Princess Diaries 2, but make it smutty. And really that's literally all I have to say to sum up what Twisted Games is about. It is so fun. Then we have Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I would not recommend this one. Sorry, I feel like that's a controversial opinion. I think that's a bit of a hot take. This book is so long. It is so much longer than it needs to be, and it's just not good as a result of that. It could have benefited from being at least 100 pages shorter, and it was so long and so boring that it's genuinely put me off reading the rest of the series. I bought all three as a set. Like, I was so convinced these were getting so much hype, I was so sure I was gonna love these, and then I read the first one and decided that the rest of them just wouldn't be for me. All I can really remember about this book is it was really long and I was bored, but I couldn't actually tell you now what it was about, so I don't recommend this one, and I think you can just skip this series. I don't want to say Lucy Score in general because, you know, maybe there are other books that are more interesting. You know what, I'm not even gonna say you can skip this series because I haven't read the rest of them, so who am I to say? You can skip the first one. Maybe the second one reads a little better and isn't as long and clunky and boring, but yeah, just do yourself a solid. There's so many better romance books out there that aren't too long, so yeah, go ahead, go for it. It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. I have not read this. I have no interest in reading this or any Colleen Hoover book. I'm not surprised it's on this list because everybody seems to really like not everybody, but there are a lot of people that seem to really like Colleen Hoover and read her books, and obviously the It Ends With Us movie has come out this year, so I'm not surprised this is on the list. I'm disappointed that it's on this list. I don't understand why we're giving such a bad writer a platform. Like, just ignoring the external stuff about surrounding Colleen Hoover and the external controversies. I've read Ugly Love, and that's all I needed to read to know that I never wanted to read a Colleen Hoover novel ever again. The writing, yeah, I will never be reading a Colleen Hoover novel again after Ugly Love. Like, what on earth was that? I feel like anybody watching literally knows the part of the book that I'm thinking about and internally like screaming at right now. Then The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston is on here. I have not read this one. I don't own it. I'm looking for a physical copy of it and then I will read it. I don't know what this one is about, but I absolutely loved The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, and I am hoping to read a novel love story by the end of the year. So then The 7 Year Slip will be the only one left for me to read. I'm not surprised this is on this list. I think it's deserved from what I read of Ashley Poston. I.e., after reading The Dead Romantics, I'm not surprised that people love Ashley Poston because that book made me cry so hard. Then we have Things We Left Behind by Lucy Score. This is the third book in the Knock 'Em Out series, which is the same one as Things We Never Got Over. I'm still a little bit tempted to read this one, but also I'm not, because the first one was just so long and clunky, and I don't think I've heard any reviews that would convince me that if I didn't like the first one I would like the third one. I don't know, I'm still ever so slightly tempted to possibly read this one day. And then the last book in this list is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is... Book Lovers ranks one of my lowest of the Emily Henry books, to be honest. I am a bit surprised that this one made the list. I thought it would have been Funny Story. I know like Funny Story only came out in April, so maybe numbers and maths wise there just wasn't enough time, but I feel like the way everybody flocked to read Funny Story by Emily Henry makes me think that one would have maybe made the list, or like Beach Read, because that's the oldest one. I don't know, I'm a little bit surprised that it's Book Lovers, to be honest with you. I would 100% like recommend Book Lovers. Emily Henry can't write bad book, but in terms of my ranking, my least favorite Emily Henry is You and Me on Vacation, Before You All Come at Me. I can't stand Friends to Lovers, that's why. And then Book Lovers would be like just on top of that as my second least favorite. It's not that there's anything particularly wrong with this book, to be honest with you. Like, I enjoyed it, it was fine, I had a good time with it, but that's just kind of like where I stand with this one. So I do recommend it. I recommend all Emily Henry books. So Emily Henry comes up with the most creative ideas, and basically I feel like she watches like movie rom-coms and she looks at the presentation of characters in those movie rom-coms and then she decides to write from their perspective. So in this we follow our main character, and her boyfriend has left her for like a small town like country girl. He was like a big city exec and he was dating her, and then he went to this small town and realized the true meaning of Christmas and happiness, and how dragon lady horrible his girlfriend in the city was, and threw his whole life away to move to this small town and be with the love of his life that he just met. And so this follows our main character, who is like the big city girl and loves working in the city, and you know, doesn't live in this small town and know the true meaning of Christmas. And we follow her story and her relationship with the city and her relationship with small towns and her forming a relationship with somebody else. And it's about two people who kind of feel like they are fundamentally wrong for everyone that they are with, and then meet each other and realize that they are not wrong for each other. They're both wrong together, if that makes sense. I did really enjoy it, and I'm due a reread of this one, so maybe I would enjoy it more the second time around. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I would recommend any Emily Henry novel, to be honest with you, but this one just happens to be lower in my rankings. And so that is the fantasy and romance sections of the most read books of the 2024 Goodreads challenge so far. I'll be interested to see how, if any, these change like at the end of the year. I really hope that they do one at the end of the year so I can see how many of them that I read. I'm not surprised by a lot of these making the list, but at the same time I also am a little bit surprised because some of them came out a good number of years ago now, so it's interesting to see what is still continuing to garner attention and garner reads even though it came out like a little while ago. For the most part, I can say that I recommend most of the books that I have read on this list. There's only a couple where I think those really weren't for me, they really weren't to my taste or my preference, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. But yeah, like overall, for the most part, I can really see why these books are still so popular. They are books that I've loved, they're books that my friends have loved, that I can see the community loves, and I would still recommend to people, so I can definitely see why these are making lists like this and still getting attention, still getting so many reads in 2024. And yeah, this was kind of just a fun little video that I saw this list came out, and I saw loads of other people in the community talking about this list and just really wanted to sit down and chat about it. I had no real goal for this video other than let's go through the list and have a chat. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you did enjoy it and you would like to see more from me, then do please feel free to hit that big red subscribe button down below. Stay tuned for future content. I upload every Wednesday and every Sunday, so there is no shortage of bookish content here for you to enjoy. I hope you guys are having a fantastic week, you're enjoying everything you are reading, and there are no reading slumps in your future. And I will see you for my next video. Bye guys.